Who here has heard of the Manning Passing Academy? A couple of
You ain't got to lie, Craig.
Alright, so just a quick little explanation. Manning Passing Academy is hosted by the Manning family, Archie Manning, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, and Cooper Manning. They invite high school athletes, specifically quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs to get better with their position, learn more about it, and with their, what they call their five fundamentals of strength. I'm not going to get into too much of that, but it's basically a camp for people at that position to get better at it if they want to go to college or something like that. What this is there are spots open for the athletic training staff. If anyone is majoring in athletic training or anything like that, it's a sports medicine aid where you get to help out with the trainers, like collect equipment for them, help them out during the camps and during mealtime, stuff like that. It's really easy sign up. I have a pile of forms right here if y'all are interested. And if the power runs out and if y'all didn't get a form, you can just email me by my university email. It's c00113508@louisiana.edu. Just sign this form. You can email it to Amelia Castell. Once you send that to her, she'll get back in touch with you, and then you'll have to send a photo of yourself for your badge, which you'll get when you arrive at the camp. All right. Anyone have any questions? Yeah.
What is the time frame?
I don't know the time, but the date starts June 25th, June 28th. Also, the event is held on Nicholls State University, and you'll have the option to stay in a dorm on campus with people who you prefer, or if you can make housing arrangements not on the campus in that area, that works too for them. Anyone else? No?
Thank you, Mac. I'm gonna say a couple things about this too. Guys, remember, even if you're not a current athletic training major, athletic training is moving to graduate programs. So you may one day be like, hey, I think I want to do that. In addition, coaching. The Manning Passing Academy is almost like a convention, honestly. You have not just players from all over the country. I mean, the high school kids are their bread and butter. That's who's paying like the tuition to go to the camp. But one of their calling cards working with the Manning family is they bring in the top quarterbacks, the top wide receivers from all over the country to be counselors. And so naturally you have coaches coming from all over the country to be counselors. And so that's really where the networking happens, man, especially if you want to be in coaching and athletic training. A quick story about how, and I'm not going to get on the soapbox, but it's just the power of, it's not what you know and it's not who you know, it's who knows you. USL back then, I did my undergraduate. My master's at Southern Mississippi, my PhD at Auburn, and I had to luckily meet people who got to know me to get those positions. At the time, I didn't know I was dyslexic. My GRE was so bad that like they were like, dude, how did you finish undergrad? So I'm on an airplane traveling to an athletic training conference, sitting next to a gentleman from Southern Mississippi. And he asked me why I was, where I was going. He probably knew where, but he was just being nice. And I said, well, I'm going to this conference and I'm gonna hopefully try to interview for an athletic training graduate position. And he just kind of was talking about where I'm from and all that stuff. And then finally, after a few minutes, I said, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to the same conference. And I'm like, cool, are you presenting? He's like, no, I'm going to interview for graduate assistant. I got the job, man. And he's like, your GRE is really not great, but we can get you in on probationary status, and if you make the grades, you can stay in grad school. So in other words, it's not what I knew, and it wasn't who I knew, it's who knew me. He had to get to know me for that to mean anything. And then while I was at Southern Miss, I worked women's volleyball, women's softball, helped with football during 2 days. And a position at Auburn came up for a doctoral assistant. And I asked my boss, I said, because I learned, right? That's how I learned. I said, boss, do you know anybody at Auburn? And my boss, Matt Smith, was like, oh yeah, I worked with that Atlanta faculty. He talked different. But we learned to understand each other. But he knew the head athletic trainer at Auburn. And so he calls him, and the guy was like, well, that's not one of our GAs. He said, but my wife runs a brand new fellowship called the Kenny Howard Fellowship through the Houston Clinic, and give her a call. So I give her a call and say, my name's Brian Campbell, and she's like, stop. Where are you from? And I was like, Louisiana. I thought I was gonna not get the job. And she was like, where are you from in Louisiana? I was like, South Louisiana. She's like, what town are you from? I was like, you've never heard of it. I was like, it's called Delco. She's like, I'm from St. Martinville. I was like, get out of here. So dude, I went up there. It was really just a formality. We knew the same people. We came from the same background. And I got the job. And it wasn't because of my grades. Sure as heck wasn't because of my GRE. It was because of meeting people, talking to people, and networking with people. So to piggyback on what Matthew's saying, these types of opportunities aren't just good for resume stuff. It's good to meet people so that they can know you, right? It's not what you know, and guys, it's not who you know. I know Peyton Manning, but that dude don't know me, and it ain't gonna get me nothing, right? I know who he is, but he doesn't know who I am. So how do you get people to know who you are by doing these kind of internships and putting yourself out to go meet and interact, and it's basically free, it's a week of free interviews. Okay, so, all right, where are we? Besides Bourgeois. I took Friday to, I wanted to lecture a little bit about some so what before I kind of get back to the basics. And again, the so what of our body's way of having hydraulic lift systems with multiple groups of muscles that are all working on the same team. Once again, when you're squatting, you cannot not move your hips and your knees at the same time. Well, technically you can, but if you just move your hips, you're going for a fall. And if you just move your knees, you're going for a fall. They have to work together. So it makes sense that all of these biarticular muscles can kind of have some magic to them to say, hey, I got you both hips and knees. When I'm pulling, I'm not just pulling at a hip. I'm pulling at a hip, I'm influencing a hip, a knee, and several times an ankle. Why do I not include the ankle? Because sometimes you can do like Smith machine ball squats where your ankle motion is kind of a little bit because the wall support you, but your hips and your knees always gonna be moving together. That is a cool party trick if you can squat by just moving your hips. So you naturally have muscles that cross those two joints that are going to be working towards the same goal. Okay, that hydraulic system. So getting back to you remember my speaker. But getting back to hip muscles, not hip muscles, knee muscles. Our vast, bless you, our vast higher. Now we talked about the vast higher, right? The vastus intermedius, lateralis, medialis. And then who's the lead singer of that group? The rectus femoris, right? Crosses into the hip, does stuff that the others don't. We talked about also why these quad muscles, the medialis, lateralis, have obliquity to them, not for motion, but for stability, to keep that patella in check so that it doesn't glide, that train stays on the train tracks. Here we have a muscle called the gracilis. And the gracilis is the adductor version of the rectus femoris. What do I mean by that is, you're going to have a family of adductor muscles, kind of like the family of perineals. And one of those in that family goes off and does something at the knee where the others don't. So again, vastus, lateralis, medialis, intermedius, rectus femoris. It goes off and does something in the hip that the others don't because they don't cross their hip. Same thing with the gracilis. Now, why don't you see its other family? Because those muscles are hip functioning muscles and we're at the knee right now. But the gracilis is an adductor, okay? It's an adductor, kind of starts off at the pubis, crosses the knee posteriorly. It's one of these pes anserine, these three little notcher muscles right there. So it pulls in the direction of knee flexion. When we get to the hip, you're going to see how it's going to function as a hip adductor. And when the knee is flexed, it's going to be an internal rotator.
Okay? Gracilis. Now, does that look like a big, powerful muscle? No, but remember when we talked about the sartorius, longitudinal muscles have a mechanical advantage of speed. Why? Because they go long, when they pull, it's like it gets the signal from point A to point B faster. That's just another way to look at it. Because when you striate, you have to kind of contract. The wave takes longer to propagate down the channel when the cards, when the fibers are slotted. But when the fibers are long, the start to the finish happens I'd say instantaneously, but a heck of a lot more fast. So it's not necessarily that the muscle has the mechanical advantage of speed. Its signal has the mechanical advantage of speed because those fibers literally go longitudinally from one end to the other. Those rope-like muscles. Knee flexor and knee internal rotator when the knee is bent or when the knee is flexed. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Q angle. Q stands for quad. Quad angle. They used to think, and guys, this is all it is basically. Hips come in different widths, and so the concept was that wider hips have greater angles of inclination of the femur, and the tibia kind of has to be kind of straight down to absorb direct compression. So the wider your hips, the steeper this angle of your quad that's running down your feet. And they used to think that was some stuff with ACL tears in females and wives. And so Q angle or quad angle there's relative and absolute angles. What we know now, this is why I keep this up, is what we know now, the biggest reason why ladies have more ACL tears. Has anybody had an ACL tear in here before? Nobody? Is what a concept called stiffness, or another word for it is just tone, natural tone of muscles. And that's changing a lot, thank God. Because back in the day, back in my day, women didn't work out in high school. Well, men didn't work out in high school. Like in Delco, our basketball coach thought that if you worked out, it was going to mess with your shot. Like that's old school kind of thinking, that we don't want to work out because we don't want to, our coach thought that like if you just did any weight, you were just going to like look like Arnold. You know? And so we would get a lot of, I worked with women's sports a lot, and a lot of the girls that came in from all over the country were great athletes, but never lifted. And so the difference, one of several differences between men and women is that, not that there's not exceptions to these rules, but women tend to be more flexible. Men tend to be stiffer. And the reason we're less flexible and more stiff is because we naturally kind of have higher muscle mass in some of our muscles. And so remember, muscles don't just move us, right? They serve as stabilizers. So if we have natural tendency to be more stiff at our joints, that's more stability we have, especially like with our hamstrings, stabilizing our knee, preventing those bones from shifting around each other. So what's cool though is that with the advent of strength and conditioning at younger ages for ladies, they're getting the kind of training they need for their muscles to serve as better stabilizers when they're being physically active. That's kind of cool. The infamous hamstrings. So I don't know the exact story, but it's something about like they used to hang pigs up by these muscles because the tendons were real strong and they could just kind of hang them up at the butcher shop. So the ham would be in pigs and the strings they would tie them up. Who knows? But the hamstrings are a group of three main muscles, but we do have to talk about some semantics here, okay? So the three main muscles are semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and biceps femoris. However, and the way I like to look at it is the membranosus is the most medial. That's how I kind of remember the order. Mem, ten, and then 5. The membranosus and tendinosus run and cross medial on the inside, and the biceps femoris crosses lateral on the outside. Tendinosus goes into that super duper cool peasants ring area, and the membranosus inserts right over here, more on the closer to the condyle for my athletic training majors, if you know that. And they start on the ischial tuberosity. That's your butt muscle, your sitting bone, right? That's where you sit. You sit bone. Hamstrings, you just think about tight hamstrings. You think about spasm or cramped hamstrings. That's because when you're closed chain, those cats are doing some work, man. They're working by being simultaneous knee and hip extensors. Now, I know I'm going to teach you that they're knee flexors. I get it. But what I'm saying is that they're hip extensors because they cross the hip and the back. But they're pulling on the lower leg, and when they pull on the lower leg, what happens to the knee? The knee extends. Some freaky stuff. And they work as stabilizers. They work to keep that tibia from doing this. So they have some big time responsibilities. Now let me talk real quick, venturing off into cramps and spasms. Now I'm going to do that at the end of class. So your hamstrings are some big time players for closed chain, running, jumping, and the reason is because of how they cross. The things they do. Crossing the hip posterior, crossing the knee posterior. In open chain, we're going to learn that it's a knee flexor. But again, what I got to teach you is how in closed chain, when it's pulling there, it's moving everything at the same time. And in addition, it's preventing this from happening sometimes. And you think about cutting and planting, that's a lot of friction on the foot. And that friction wants to rotate your leg like a teeter-totter. So having those hamstrings there to check it, keep it in position, is of use. Let's talk about that biceps femoris. The semimembranosus and tendinosus pretty much straight go from the ischial to the butt bone, straight to the inside of the tibia. But that biceps femoris is more like a, bless you. The biceps femoris is more like a soleus and a gastroc mechanism. No, maybe not. It's more like a, bless you. It's more like a tricep example where you have lateral or medial head and then you have a long head that goes off and crosses into another joint. I think that's a better analogy. Bless you. Dude, coronavirus? It's all good. So, guys, I know it was a joke, right? I don't like, it's a total joke. There's so many people dousing me with holy water. What do you guys see? You see that biceps femoris, and you see like this little feather kind of meaty part of the muscle that's on the femur? That is a short head. I think we have a picture. There we go. We're going to excise, we're going to dissect that long head, and look at that short head of the biceps femoris. Doesn't go anywhere near the hip. Doesn't go anywhere near the hip. So its only function is going to be at the knee. It's going to blend in with the biceps long head, and we're going to call it the biceps femoris. So at the knee, you don't have to be redundant. Biceps femoris infers both heads. Like the triceps break out of the elbow infers both heads, but when we get into the shoulder, we only have one head that functions at the shoulder, right? So we have precedent for this concept. But at the knee, both heads cross the knee posteriorly. Now this is the one muscle that crosses the knee posterolateral. So when we flex our knee, this string is pulling in a direction of lateral or external rotation. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, a couple things. Biceps femoris is a big muscle. Like if you take your hand and kind of fit it on the outside of your knee, it's a big, thick string back there. It's a big muscle. When you flex your knee with a lot of force, you kind of need some cancelization if you need it. And so that biceps femoris, being a bigger muscle, can kind of cancel out all the other little muscles that you have on this. I say little, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and powerhouses too. I told you last class why you kind of have to have more insurance on the inside is because of that cut and plant mechanism, where you have more internal rotators that can serve eccentrically or to try to limit excessive external rotation. And again, sometimes they misfire, sometimes they forget to turn on, sometimes they're tired and they make mistakes. And you go to cut and plant and that muscle didn't turn on to help stabilize and too much cut and plant. So again, that helps to answer the question of, I don't understand, I've done this move thousands of times. Why all of a sudden, and I'm like, you've probably chewed millions of times. Why did you bite your tongue? Or why did you bite your lip? Because maybe you make mistakes. And the more tired you are, the more likely you're going to make a mistake. You would think by now you wouldn't bite your lip when you eat, but it happens. And it should make sense. Law of large numbers. The more you do something, the more likely something crazy is going to happen. If you never drive, you're never going to get in an accident. But the more you drive, the increased chances something rare is going to happen. It's the same thing with injuries. Yeah? The more you play, the more you put yourself in a position to have an accident, the odds of accidents go up, especially when you're tired. All right, let's take a look at this popliteus. It's kind of one of my favorite muscles. It's so cool. It's not a big muscle, it's not a powerful muscle, but it's a really neat muscle. So your body has a mechanism in place for efficiency of upright skeletal erection. So we have erector spinae, right? That helps us to erect the spine. Our body has a mechanism in place at the knees that help us save energy on leg muscles to keep us standing upright. Called the screw home mechanism. Maybe some of you have heard that before. But basically, if you can take a skeleton, a balanced skeleton with no muscles, that skeleton can actually support itself. It can balance itself without the need of anything else because of the way the knee locks into place. Now, a couple things that lock the knee into place. Remember how I said those collateral ligaments get put on slack when you flex the knee? Well, if they get put on slack because they're slightly posterior, then that means when you extend the knee, they become stiff. Another thing that happens is there's some slight rotation that goes on. I'm not talking about passive, but just there's kind of this natural groove that takes place as the knee extends that kind of brings these condyles into those condyles and they kind of lock into place. What I mean by that is you can see how my knuckles kind of fit when my hands are in anatomical position. But when I flex, they're not articulated anymore. They unfit. Make sense? So the point is that when your knees are in anatomical position, it saves like your quads from having to, like in other words, if you stood in a mini squat position, how long could you hold that? For very long, right? So having your knees in a locked position is a position of efficiency. Now, I'm not saying, Campbell's like, you should all. It's not what I'm saying at all. And we know too, if it's real hot outside and you try to stand, I remember when I was younger, I was in the marching band for a couple of years until sports, and then I couldn't be in it anymore. Yeah, I remember people would drop like flies sometimes because they would put us in like attention, and it's hot. People would just pass it out, right? Because having their legs extended, mess with some blood flow stuff. But what I'm saying is that from an efficiency standpoint, when your knees are locked into place, that saves muscles from having to keep them in that position. So if the knees can go into a locked, efficient position, then it should make sense that something has to unlock that. What I mean by that is, if we're doing like this exercise where I'm working my flexors, right? And I see how gravity's trying to extend the whole time. It makes sense that my flexors are on the whole time. But what we also know is that if we're doing this exercise where like there's a full range of motion, and let's say I'm here and I go from here to there, what happens at halfway? At halfway, I kind of need something to kind of tip me over before I can start eccentric, concentric. I need something to kind of just get me going. Just a little something to just tip me over so that the external force is trying to, in the case of my knees, trying to flex me. And that's what the popliteus does. The best example of the popliteus is when you were kids, and you messed with your buddy. Let's say he's looking the other way, and you come from behind him and you kick him in the back of the leg. You unlocked their knee, right? Let's say they're standing with a straight knee, you come in, you unlock their knee. So the popliteus does. Now let's keep in mind, most of your knee flexors come in straighter than a straight sack of straight. They don't have much torque. They don't have much rotation component in the knee in anatomical position because they're coming in hot. They're coming in straight. The popliteus, on the other hand, its articulation is kind of on this condyle. Watch this sucker right here. You see these? See these little red bumps? So my point is that the popliteus comes out in a third dimension for a mechanical advantage of deflection where the others are coming kind of straight. It has a mechanical advantage of deflection in anatomical that the others don't have because it gets to kind of start on a condyle which kind of comes out in that third dimension. So the popliteus unlocks an anatomically positioned knee. It unlocks the knee. It gives you a little kick from the back to unlock yourself so that way you can start using quads and hip extensions to go up and down. That make sense? That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. Thank you, popliteus, for kicking me in the knee over and over again. Now the way it runs, so this is a, help me out guys, is this a right or a left? A right. And front view or back view? Back view, posterior view, right? So the popliteus is running from superolateral to inframedial. So what I want you to imagine is if that muscle is running like this, when I flex my knee, it's pulling in a direction of medial or internal rotation. Meaning that when the knee is flexed, it's trying to spin the knee like this. This is a right. So watch. Here, it's trying to do this. Popliteus is also commonly thought to help prevent, it's an insurance policy for excessive extension. Because again, those other muscles come in so straight that they really don't, even though they're big, strong muscles, they don't have the mechanical advantage in that position to pull back. So the popliteus kind of gives you some extra mechanical advantage in an anatomical or past position of flexion. So if you have a hyperextended knee, there's some guillotine mechanism of ACL stuff concerned, but also popliteus, rupture strains because it's kind of trying to help prevent excessive extension. Do you want me to talk to y'all about, I'm not going to ask it on the test, but I'm trying to give feedback. Some students like when I talk about kind of injuries and kind of things like that. You want to talk to y'all about the guillotine mechanism of ACL tears? Doesn't that sound fun? All right. If anybody can't handle people getting hurt, you gotta watch what I'm about to show you. Let's check it out. Watch this. I remember watching this in real time, bro. I was at Southern Miss. Okay. I'm going to try to pause it. Glenn Dorsey. All right, here we go. Okay. All right. It looks like an ostrich leg. His knee is supposed to bend the other way. Okay. Now. And don't feel sorry for him. He played in the NFL for several years because it was just an ACL tear. Watch, I'm going to get into the mechanism. Look at that. Bang! It's like getting shot. Boom! Ain't no popliteus can help with that. All right. So, this is how Dr. Bob, I've mentioned Dr. Bob several times. This is how Dr. Bob explained the guillotine mechanism of ACL tears. And his analogy was that the ACL lives in between these femoral condyles, right? So you have, it goes from posterolateral to anteromedial. So they kind of run like this, your PCL and your ACL, crisscross applesauce. That's why they call it cruciate cross, right? You have one in the front, one in the back. And what Dr. Bob said is that because your knee has rotation, screw home, twist home, and then if you excessively extend, then you keep twisting. In other words, it's going to keep traveling on that natural groove of those condyles. And if you start to take this bone across into the groove where those ligaments live, that bone is going to get into that groove and pow, snap it off. That's what he called it, the guillotine mechanism of ACL tear. When you have a hyperextended knee and the tibia literally passes inside of that groove and snaps off that rope. So I guess my point is it looked a lot worse than it actually is, where it looks like he shattered his bone and just broke his bone and just had an ACL tear. Does anybody want to see someone else get hurt? No? Okay. Sorry. One more? All right, no, I'm not finished. All right, maybe next time. Maybe what we could do is have, when we get into the biomechanics lecture, we could just have like that injury biomechanics video where we could just watch a ton of people get mean. But it would be like optional or something. All right, everybody, let's keep moving. So, all right, so help me out. In our circles, we should have talked about the sartorius, the gracilis, the rectus, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, biceps femoris, vastus medialis, lateralis intermedius, the gastroc. Let's get that gastroc. Get to the gastroc. Don't forget about the gastroc because it's going to be in your ankle circle. So look, here's the gastroc. And how do we know it functions at the knee? Because it crosses the knee. How do we know it's a knee flexor? Because it crosses in the back. It crosses the knee posteriorly. Okay? Now, let me give you oh, Brian, do we want to do that now? No, let's not do it now. Okay? So, let's review. Who are our knee flexors? Gastrocnemius, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, biceps femoris, popliteus, sartorius, gracilis. Right, those are major players. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. And especially in terms of not just movement but stabilization. And when we do this, or we need some extra help to make sure our knee doesn't get too far. Help with that firm point. It's one of many functions of all these knee flexors. Who are the knee extensors? 4 horsemen. We have 3 vasti group muscles, right? Lateralis, medialis, and medius. Location, location, location. On your circles, I do my best to try to put things in location. So you notice the medialis is more medial, the lateralis is more lateral, and the medius in the middle. And then that rectus femoris. Who are the lateral rotators when the knee is flexed? Biceps femoris. Who are the medial or internal rotators when the knee is flexed? Everybody except the gastroc. All of my flexors except the gastroc. Because the gastroc is running. You can almost think of the gastroc more as a definite stabilizer. It's literally just pulling the lower leg into the femur. But it has no obliquity at the knee when the knee is flexed. But all of my semimembranosus, my semitendinosus, my popliteus, my sartorius, and my gracilis have the medial crossing, the following direction of internal knee rotators when the knee is flexed, when the knee is bent. Any questions? All right. Close your, if people, I just got, because we have time and I just need to show you all one more quick. So if you can't handle injuries, it's all good, just close your eyes, okay? I'm not going to tease you, I'm not going to point at you, I get it. But just, I got to show you this. Don't look, you definitely don't want to look at this. And that's a right angle. All right. Who said the foot can't abduct? Sorry. Okay, so again, man, this is whys. Who knows why? Like, he could have had a stress fracture already. He could have had a bone cyst. I mean, it's just, or it could just be one of those where he hit it at the right angle with the right amount of force. And remember, man, that foot wants to keep going forward. Okay, just in time. And it happens so fast that his body doesn't even have time to process that there's a problem. He goes to weight bear on it. The only reason he really knows is that the weight bearing mechanism kind of didn't work. All right, here's another one. Y'all, there's so many, like there's new ones now. There was a few go-to ones that I had, but apparently that's
Have you seen the gymnastics board?
oh, look at that, man. Is it this one? Let's check it out. Keep your eyes closed. Is this it? Oh, I don't like the quality of the video though. Yeah, that's not a muscle spasm. Actually, it is. Oh, here it is. Yes. Okay, now what's interesting about this one? Check this out. All right, did you hear that? All right, did you hear that? Now, all right.
This will be the last thing I teach you today, but it's very cool, and it's the concept of a three-point bend, or a bend in general. There's different kind of bends, but remember growing up as kids, it's going to be Easter time, and remember how you can't break an Easter egg by compressing it longitudinally, because compression can dissipate a lot of force, right? Objects are weaker in tension than they are in compression, right? So what happens is when you bend something, like say you go grab a twig or a stick and you bend it, when you bend, let's say I'm trying to bend it like this, the bottom part of the structure is undergoing compression, and the top part of the structure is being pulled away, it's tension. So anytime you bend something, you're compressing one side and you're pulling apart the other side. And the object is gonna fail tension to compression. So actually when you break something, you actually break it outside to inside. Or when someone knocks someone like this and breaks their bone, the break doesn't happen on the direct hit. It happens on the other side because that's the part that's being pulled away and the fracture goes from tension to compression. So the point is, in this fracture here, you know, again, the guy's whipping his leg around, and when he makes contact, you have a bend. And sometimes, man, you just go too much. And like I said, it could be, you already would have had stress fracture, already weakened part of that bone, could have had a bone cyst, could have just been at the right force, at the right angle. But that is a bend, a 3-point bend. Well, no, that would actually be a 2-pointer. Let's see if we can stop it.
9. Excellent. 9.
All right. Now, don't look. We're almost done. Why is biomechanics of movement, biomechanics of injuries? Guys, bad things happen. Bad things happen. Whatever you guys do for a living, if you play the game long enough, bad things are going to happen. Even though it's not your job to handle the bad things, sometimes you're going to have to handle the bad things. That could be with your kids. That could be with your athletes. That could be as a coach. Bad things can happen. But listen, you don't have to be medically trained to be able to see when bad things happen, right? I mean, it's just super duper obvious, man. That's why they have the term obvious deformity. It just, whoa, that looks different. That's not supposed to be there. That's not supposed to move like that. So trust those instincts, man. Trust those instincts. That's how I learned about bone cysts. Dr. Win Lau put up an x-ray and he's like, hey, Brian, do you see anything different? And like, there was an Easter egg in the bone. And I'm like trying to overanalyze everything. He's like, come on, anything? And that's what I learned about bone cysts and how, you know, you can lay down all this nice trabeculated, but if you just have one area that's odd, that's a weak link in the chain, man. And sometimes people don't even realize they have these cysts when they go to do stuff like that. All right, guys, have a good day.